Welcome to IREM-OC's educational session, Navigating Property Management Today. My name is Rich Wingard. I'm with Gothic Terra Pacific. Terra Pacific Landscape is a 30-year-old company specializing in landscape management, design, build services for the commercial real estate industry, focusing mainly on commercial office. Last year, I merged my company with Gothic Landscape. No, it was not named after an architectural style or a religious cult. It was named after the street they founded the company on. I always like to get that clear. And I merged my company after 30 years because I thought it was a strategic move. They focus mainly historically on community development and multifamily and HOA landscape management, while Terra Pacific has focused primarily on commercial office. And my geographic area is LA South to San Diego, while theirs is LA North, Northern California, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. So it was a pretty good fit, and I've been happy with the move, and I'm here today to introduce our panel. Our moderator is Michael Brown with Steadfast Company, and then we have Sarah Dalia. I knew I was going to get that wrong.
All right.
With the REM Group. We have Daniel Karcher with Davis Company, and we have Jason Purvis with
Granite Properties.
With Granite Properties, based in Dallas.
Based in Dallas.
There you go. And so I'm going to, without further ado, hand it over to Michael. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So maybe I'd give a little bit more background on our panelist here. And as I said, I'm with Steadfast Management. I've only been there 2 months since I left Camden, so I'm still getting used to saying that correctly. But I'm in multifamily, and I'm really excited here to have this group to be able to talk to you today about kind of the challenges that we've been having in our real estate markets and what things we've been able to do to kind of combat that. And I think it'll be some great conversation here today. So a little bit of background on Sarah. She is the CEO and principal of the REM Group, and she's got 28 years of experience, although she looks like she started at 4 maybe. 4 million square feet of commercial space and 12,000 apartment units, so quite a bit there. She's got a Bachelor of Arts from Cal State Long Beach as a CPM, was the past president of this very chapter here. I'm excited to say that. And she got an award for innovation during her term there, so that was pretty exciting for us here. And she's also served for the last 14 years on the Mercy House Living Center, so brings a lot of great experience in a number of different real estate venues for us. Then we have Daniel Karcher, who is the vice president at Davis Partners. He joined Davis in 2007 and has been managing industrial and office improvements and underwriting their value add program in many developments. He's also recently completed about $100 million of development and capital improvements projects, with the most recent about $75 million in acquisitions and dispositions. He's completed major renovations and worked with corporations such as General Services Administration, State of California. He's an active member of NAIOP and ULI chapters and served on their NAIOP Young Professionals program. Has a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting and a Bachelor's of Business Administration in Information Systems and Quantitative Management. Love that title, from Loyola. Lastly, certainly not least, rounding out the panel is Jason Purvis. He is the Senior Managing Director of Southern California for Granite Properties, and he leads their day-to-day operations, developing the growth of their Southern California market. Prior to being at Granite, he was a regional vice president with the Irvine Company, where he led the development and reinvestment valued at over $2.9 billion in California and Chicago. Boy, there's a mix. 15 years in real estate. He has roles in finance, investment, asset management, and prior to that, he was a business consulting with Burning Point, which is formerly KPMG. He's a member of NAIOP and ULI and serves on the board of the Orange County Building Block Foundation Fund, and has a bachelor's degree in accounting and an MBA from the University of New Mexico, and is a real estate licensee broker in California. So we have quite a qualified panel, but I want to just get right into the meat of what our discussion about and really ask each of these panelists about what are we seeing in today in real estate as challenges, because it's constantly evolving in all of our different markets, and there's challenges with people, with tenants and re-tenanting and renovations and renewals. How are you, well, what are those challenges and kind of how are you facing them? And maybe we'll start with Sarah, since you're closest to me.
Sure. And I know when, can you hear me? Okay. When Michael first asked the question, if I was really going to answer it, honestly, I would probably say our greatest challenge right now is just growth. I think we're all experiencing a lot of growth in the industry. And with that comes challenges with regard to communication with our tenants, our residents, our associates. So for us, our major focus has really been centered around that. With regard to, it can be, we do more surveys than ever before. So we've got our NPR scores, we have our move-in scores, we have everything else that we look at, and I know everyone does them, but it's how well do we respond to them, and how accurately and how quickly. And do we take that information and do we push it forward to the on-site teams? I think, technology is something I think that's ever evolving, and I think so the challenge is to stay on top of it, to stay in front of it, be proactive versus reactive. So, gosh, I could probably speak for an hour and talk about our company culture and how we really kind of dove into the bottom layers and said, all right, really the people that matter on our teams are the people that are facing our customers every day. It's not really our associates in the office, and it's how do we stay communicative with them, how do we inspire them, and how do they authentically give great customer service, because I think the word there is authentic. I think everybody preaches, customer-centric. We're all about the customer, but it's really, do you believe that in your heart, and do you wake up in the morning, are you motivated and enthusiastic about what you're doing and what you can do to better your clients and your residents? So I think it's really more just of an organic challenge for us on how do we do that at a higher level every day.
And I don't think it's just in multifamily or even in some of the commercial that you deal. I think it's probably in all of those types as far as getting that authentic customer engagement. And I know some of the discussion we had even prior to this. How do you test for that? How do you get that authentic interaction? Because I don't know, does everyone have it and they just need to be taught that? Or, how do you do that in your company?
For us, about a year ago, I think some of you know who Chris Alexander is, and you did not set that up.
I didn't.
For Chris Alexander, but he gave the WOW series here at the conference a few years back, and he was a dear friend of mine, and I trust him, and he knows who I am and what we want to do here at REM. So for us, we engaged Chris. We had a series of seminars within our organization. We had him come in and talk to our executives and say, who are we and what do we want to do and what do we want to convey to everybody in our company? And we came up with going beyond creating value. It took us about 30 minutes to come up with sort of our slogan and who we want to be. He was prepared for about a day-long seminar just to kind of get who we are and what we want to embrace, and it was really easy for us to come up with. So I knew right then I had the right people on my team. Most of them are sitting in the first two rows.
Right.
But we really, it's just, and then he went out and he rolled out really what I saw and what our team saw and what we wanted to be every day. And we hit all of our leaders in our group because we know it stems from leadership. You can, if you're not walking the walk and talking the talk and doing everything and believing it in your heart, it's never going to happen. So it was really about inspiring all our managers on site and all of our company leaders, and so that they would then show their teams and lead from a really true, authentic place.
Yeah, very helpful. I think that, as I said, I think it spans a number of different types of real estate. In fact, Jason, what are you seeing in your challenges, and how does that maybe dovetail into what you do in the office market, more or less?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges, speaking specifically to office and trying to stay ahead of innovation and making profitable investments. But I would say one of the main things on the office side is just the cost of doing business. Of the product types, office is a capital-intensive product type. I think Green Street produces a report, and they estimate that 24% of your NOI goes back into your building in some form of actual CapEx. So how do you spend those dollars prudently? I mean, I think this cycle over the past 8 or 9 years, a lot of you in this room that are involved with office, we as an industry went through kind of redeveloping our property, so to speak, right? We completely activated outdoor areas, activated lobbies. The way people work has changed, so we gutted every space, and now we're building out progressive space. So it's a capital-intensive business. And now layer that on top of today, it really being the value add being more experiential for the customer. So how do we staff appropriately? How do we provide the appropriate services, the appropriate technology, so that has an OpEx and a CapEx component to it? So how do you allocate your dollars surgically in an already capital-intensive product type to really drive value and at the end of the day create the experiences that are memorable for all of our customers in our office environment? So I'd say that's kind of the biggest challenge that we face kind of on a daily basis. And then as it relates to secondarily, I would say, as work patterns change and people are working and want more flexibility in where and when they work, how do we change an office building or an office campus to accommodate those varying needs? And so I know we'll probably talk more about that today. But I would say also staying ahead of that and really understanding how to accommodate that on-demand work need of customers today is a challenge and one I think we're all trying to figure out right now.
Daniel, how about you? What's your take?
I think the challenges we're seeing, I think, are threefold. I mean, Sarah mentioned technology, and property technology is really changing quite quickly. And as you go and take on buildings that were built 30 plus years ago with old systems that owners haven't touched, and you get brought them on to transition into a new portfolio with little information on them. It's just a constant challenge for our managers and to communicate that to the owners on the capital intensive nature of making those necessary improvements. So trying to get the new technology in ground up buildings is a piece of cake, but the second you're dealing with an old building that's been there and you've had multiple tenants in there for 30 plus years, it's just really hard to communicate to the owners what's going on there and why it's taking so much, because they all have the visions of making these Class B properties almost Class A, and that transition is sometimes a lot more than what they underwrote. We're also seeing, just the tight labor market being a challenge, both on our construction side and also just dealing on our day-to-day vendors. There's always an emergency that comes up, and you go place that call, and a lot of our managers are getting challenged where, the vendors say, well, we can be there in 24 hours, but you have a screaming tenant at you right now. And, that is definitely, a constant challenge that I think is more seen today than a few years ago.
A common theme in all of your answers, kind of as far as CapEx, the labor, how to attract the labor, how to get them on board, technology costs. How is that affecting then your NOI, and how does that make whether you're third party or whether you're owner managed? How is it affecting the process and in sales process? Are cap rates, despite interest rates going up, we're still thinning them out? They're coming more challenging, and how do you deal with that? Because it seems like the expectations are higher. So not only from the end user, resident, or tenant, how are you combating that and still making a sense of the financial statements?
Well, I know from our perspective with dealing with a lot of third party, and then we also have our own portfolio. We're constantly challenged with that, and we're always looking at how you put out that capital to work. It's a tough decision to make. There's certain things that you don't have a choice and you just have to do, and then there's other times that you either scale back improvements to meet the owner's objectives for what their returns they're expecting, in a marketplace where they're going to sell in 3 to 5 years. So it's really hard to gauge. I mean, I couldn't give a percentage on it, on what percentage you're willing to put in or how much more capital based on what the owners originally underwrote. But we're always getting pushback when we come with, to put in this new technology, it's 3 times the cost than what you thought because you never thought this was going to break.
Right. Sarah, are you seeing that kind of difficulty?
I think the greatest way we've been able to combat the labor market, and I'm going to take it as a compliment, we keep, our folks keep getting picked up by other companies. They're paying a lot, and I'm sure that is affecting their bottom line definitely. So they've got to come up with how to complement that. But I think what we do again is we really try to look at bench strength within our organization. I think what we want to do is we want to bring in talented entrepreneurial spirits. And we want to train them and we want to coach them and we want to create leaders out of them. We've got several leadership programs, both on the maintenance side and on the management side, but it's really growing them internally. They're going to know our processes, they're going to understand our culture, what we do, and there's going to be a nice salary curve for them, but it's one that we can graduate and not have to burden anyone with heavy hours or too large of a portfolio. I really believe people are going to burn out if they're given too much or too broad. So we really try to do that internally in just the best way, and the team's amazing. So,
Jason, anything to add on that?
Yeah, so I mean, if we look at the cost of doing business, which as we were talking about before is, increase in particular on office side, I think to maintain margin, so to speak, if I heard your question right, I think there's a revenue component and an expense component too, and it's probably more revenue component than expense, honestly, because on the expense side, there's a lot of great ideas that would be really neat to explore at a property, whether it be, battery storage or a new app or things of that nature, right? But really being surgical and understanding your customer about what's going to drive value in your property is key, right? And that's a discipline you have to maintain. But the narrative, I think it's been interesting to watch across the country for office users is that as we invest in our properties right now, this is no longer a cost center for businesses. It's a revenue generating tool on how they recruit and retain. So the relative expense on the base rent they pay to their overall expenses, I think the narrative is changing and they're viewing it more as an investment than a cost. So you're seeing rent levels in particular, the Irvine Company, a lot of folks here down on the Irvine spectrum that have never been achieved before. So it's really a new conversation on people, I think, starting to pay more for environments that we collectively are creating, both service levels and physical environments, because it's helping them recruit and retain and drive top-line revenue at the end of the day. So I really think it's more of the narrative changing on the top-line revenue of really driving rental rate at the end of the day and occupancy.
So you're finding that investment, those due to the increased costs, that they're being played out in the revenue, you're able to achieve that?
Quite a bit. If you're disciplined up front about and really having those conversations with your sales professionals, i.e. leasing professionals, about what really is going to drive value on the revenue side when they're out trying to lease space, yeah, I think you're seeing it. Now, certain leasing professionals are still looking at it as a cost, and that's how they're going out and selling it, but certain leasing professionals are really able to change the narrative right now about how investing in real estate in your space for your workforce is really going to benefit your business.
And are you, maybe just to the group, are you finding that the rate at which there's a cost obviously for the technology, and whether it's new apps or softwares or things that will help to supposedly streamline your business, are you finding that the rate at which the technology is coming in and able to be infused into your business, is the cost of that outweighing the labor component? In other words, I'm just wondering, because I wrestled with this, we wrestled with it at Camden, wrestled with it at Steadfast, about that it just, the streamlining ability, as they streamline and we offload something off of our people, then we now add more on the customer facing side. And is it an even exchange? Is it seemingly even for you all, or is it just costing more and becoming more challenging in the way of training and labor?
I can comment on that. We actually had a training class yesterday via Yardi, and we had some of our top managers there learning this new program, and it's one of the questions I asked. I went and I said, is this helpful? Is this burdensome? Are you gaining something? Are you seeing that this is going to be a benefit? And it was unanimous that, because we have so many bells and whistles, so there's sort of that, okay, do we keep going? And it was all about, we're going to get this. It's going to take us a couple months, but it's going to make our jobs better and easier. So I'm all about technology. I think if you don't do it, you're just going to be behind the curve.
Yeah, I think it's...
Ditto response. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a critical component
Yeah.
of trying to make our managers more efficient and our people more efficient so they can go do what they need to do in dealing with the tenants and deal with the people side of the business. And, that's a very important aspect of it. You talk to our back office, they think it's something different, but all our people in the field, it's very critical, and it takes a lot of their time when you add these new processes to them. So we're always looking to make our people more, effective, efficient, and agile.
Are you finding the adoption rate pretty good, pretty strong when you roll that out?
It's a work in process.
I think we all share that to some degree. Well, that segues actually nicely into the second major question we had, is that, in the competitive market today, what are you doing or having to do to attract residents, tenants, that's different than maybe it was 5 years ago? Because it definitely is evolving at a much faster and accelerated pace than ever before. So obviously there's a certain sense that we have to be much more nimble than ever. And what are the prospective residents or tenants? Is their expectations much higher, and how are you meeting that? So maybe Jason hit that.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is, 5 years ago, it was who had the most modern, redeveloped project with the most amenities, right? It was all physical oriented. That was your differentiator. You were the only person in town with the nicest project, best amenities. You had a fitness center, you had a cafe, you had a modern lobby, you had an outdoor workspace. You could draw tenants. But now as we continue to reinvest in our properties, that's almost a given. You kind of have to have a certain amenity base. You have to have a progressive work environment. So I don't think that's going to be the differentiator going forward. So what we're thinking about deeply is the real differentiator is going to be the people in this room. That's going to be the differentiator. It's the human contact with our customers. And it's going to be technology. Those two things really creating experiences that more mimic hospitality, which residential, I think, is a lot farther along than office, and hospitality, i.e. hotels, we're trying to catch up to where they are. I think they got it figured out. So I think you're going to walk in office environments and it's going to feel more like a hotel in the level of service where they're solving your problems before you even know you have a problem. So that's where we're focused. It's on the people side of our business as being the real differentiator. The second piece from an office perspective, as customers, i.e. businesses, are doing more contingent work and people are more flexible in where and when they're working, we think there's going to be a real value add going forward for the first group that can really figure out how to offer flexibility. Instead of a 10,000 square foot lease when one of your renewals comes up and you try to do a 10-year deal, how do we break that 10,000 square feet down into maybe 5,000 square feet that's under a 10-year deal and give someone the flexibility to sign another 5,000 square feet maybe under 3 years and or on a year basis? So we think that there's going to be a demand for that going forward, and somebody that can really provide in an office building or a campus the ability to have month-to-month product offerings, to have 1 to 3 year leases, 5 year leases is going to be a real competitive differentiator. I think that's why we're seeing co-working take off like it is because there's a secular change and shift in how people work.
Yeah, I think I was talking to I got the luxury of being able to do a tour of the district that Vestar manages, and was talking to them about how they worked with their retail product and how they were changing it. And I had one of my UCI students, because he wanted to really understand about retail. And they're doing, in Japan, they're doing more of these shorter term leases, these 3 year leases, and they manage their people directly in retail. In fact, in a 200 store mall, they're going directly every day to all of their tenants and kind of seeing how their sales are going, because they're trying to obviously promote the sales activity. So I think your point about the flexibility seems very, very much in line with the way we've gone. We talked earlier about how everybody wants the center of the brownie, right? Just what they want, when they want it, for as long as they want it. And it seems like you've been able to make some adjustments to be able to sort of meet those demands and make that happen. Has it been without a lot of challenge, or what has been an obstacle to be able to get there?
Yeah, I think for a lot of organizations, they need to be okay to fail, right? I think we're in the middle of both technology as well as on-demand workspace, that we need to make small bets and test it out, because this is happening real time right now. So a few of the things we're doing to enable more on-demand workspace environments is, you go do your co-working deals and let them operate that, right? And those co-working operators have both hospitality figured out. If you've been in an Industrious or you've been in a WeWork, they really, you go in there and they're simplifying your day, right? And that's where we all kind of need to get to as an industry, I think. And so, they can manage the month-to-month tenant, the one-year tenant, the small tenant, small business. So if you have that component, we're experimenting and trying to do more of that in our portfolio. The second piece is we're starting to experiment, take a floor, you take 2 floors, and you build a bunch of small 1,000 square foot spaces where you have the ability to go in and do 1 to 3 year deals. Now, you're not going to completely demo those every time. You're going to have to be minimal on the TI, but you have a portion of your asset where you can allow some flexibility if someone isn't ready to do a 5 or 10 year deal. So those are some kind of small bets, we're making right now and testing it out in different parts of our markets across the country. And, eventually we're trying to get to a point where we can figure out how in a building to accommodate again on a renewal, going back to the example, a 10,000 square foot user, if they don't know they're going to need 7 or 15 long-term, how do you accommodate them through the life cycle?
Do you think, because this just came to me as far as the idea of this process in a commercial environment, do you think there is an evolution or movement towards sort of an Airbnb model in the commercial side of things? It sounds like that.
So you already have that. You have technologies like liquid space that are out there, and they're exactly that. They're effectively Airbnb, where you or I, if we had an office space with a lease, we could sublease 3 offices, put it on liquid space, and anyone could come use it for a day. So that will be a component of this on-demand kind of workplace environment that's coming. Yeah.
Are there any challenges you're seeing? I mean, in multifamily, there's been a lot of upheaval in an Airbnb model just because of it's a little bit different in a living environment, people coming in and out that you don't know. Are they renting to Al-Qaeda? What's happening out there, right? So you just don't know. But I mean, are there any kinds of similar things you're finding in commercial then of that concern when they do that?
Yeah, I'll say me personally, I haven't had a lot of experience with kind of liquid space in our portfolio, so not quite sure on the day-to-day use, but my gut would be that it's very similar operational challenges, no doubt.
Yeah. How about you, Daniel? What are you seeing as far as?
I'll speak on the other side, on the industrial side of our portfolio and business park side. Not as sexy, that's for sure. There's still the capital extensive nature of it, but I will say we do already have the short-term tenancy at our business parks for the 1,000 to 3,000 square feet. We don't do the TIs in there other than carpet and paint. But it's not the same environment that he's delivering at his Class A office buildings. But there are a lot of small business, especially in Southern California. Our business parks are approximately 98% in our minds full. So that's a unique component from our perspective. On the cost side, on industrial and the improvements of transitioning those old buildings, I mean we're seeing that you've got to the owners have the expectation of bringing these Class A buildings that are low clear height. They don't have ESFR sprinkler systems. They don't have Title 24 compliance. So you're going through and having to make this major investment on some of these buildings. And the owners go show you a picture of a Class A building, and they say, "I want this." And you look at them and say, "Well, let's wait a second. Hold back. How about this?" And it's a conversation that evolves. I mean, in the last 2 years, I've renovated a building that Heinz Ketchup occupied for 30 years. It was a mess of a manufacturing facility. Thankfully, we had a clear height there that we were able to rip all that infrastructure out. I mean, they had spent tens of millions of dollars on putting all of their manufacturing components in this building, and I want it to be just a dry warehouse facility. But you go into that and you're dealing with an old roof structure, you're dealing with a sprinkler system that you're hoping you have the fire flow or you have the flow rate to actually serve an ESFR system. You've got all of the offices that you're dealing with. I mean, the old manufacturing space is over officed by 25-30%. So you're trying to rip out some of your office while still trying to keep the configuration. And again, I had an owner that wanted to redo the whole front office elevation and in the middle of the project. So they switched asset managers on it, and I'm fine. I said, okay, let's go deal with it. But they completely changed the office elevation. We had to tear off the front of the building and put it back on in the city of LA, mind you. So, so that's just a unique aspect where the owners are looking to make the investment to try and get, you know, the Amazons of the world that don't make any money, we hear. You know, so they want those tenants because that's, you know, industrial's the darling child right now, even though it's not very sexy.
Absolutely. Are you finding then that more people are willing, owners, they're willing to spend the money to meet this new demand, to get sexy, to make, you know, 40 the new 20 kind of thing? I mean, is that what's happening?
They're doing it within reason. I mean, they're definitely wanting to spend the money, and it all comes based on, you know, what they're looking at. They'll scale back if they really need to. Or they won't go all the, you know, some will go all the way. I've got some owners that say, I know I want this and this is what's going to attract that tenant. Others are, you know, go kind of get this done and we'll wait till the next tenant comes along to go finish it, which is a lot harder to deal with depending on what jurisdictions you're in. So I see both sides of it there.
So Sarah, tell me about your perspective as far as, you know, what are you doing to attract tenants that you see as different from 5 years ago? I mean, how are we, and what are their expectations, and how are you meeting them?
Sure, and you know, we have the benefit of having a portfolio of woody walk-ups all the way to new builds, so there's such a variety and a range, and we also manage commercial and multifamily. So I think it's, you just literally take a building at a time, and you take a demographic at a time. A lot of people don't want to live in the mega, you know, full amenitized buildings. Some people just want a woody walk-up with a pool. Others don't care, or others do care if there's a gym, some don't. So I think we really just take it case by case. We just had a building that we were looking at the other day in LA, and the owner is thinking, you know, this is a value add play. Do we go modern on this building? Do we try to make it, you know, really cool? Well, it's got a pool, it's got a laundry facility. We might put in a bike rack. So there's really nothing there. So the idea was, we kind of turned it into, let's go Hollywood glam and kind of make it more like just a boutique-y, kind of a hotel feel where it's just really simple and bare bones. So I think we can overvalue and amenitize also. So we have to be really cognizant of, you know, what cash is coming in, what the rent rates are going to be. Some markets just are maxed out, and some properties are maxed out from what you can capture and get back. We have another building called Madison Newport. We took that on about 2 years ago. It essentially had a pool and a rundown fitness center and a pile of boxes in the office every day from Amazon. Big Amazon clientele. So we removed one of the restrooms near the pool and turned it into a parcel pending location, and then moved the manager's office into more of an open concept and gave the residents a business center. And so we created 2 amenities for very little dollars. And we were able to do that because we took all those boxes out of the office and moved them into the parcel pending lockers. So I think it's just being creative and being just aware of your demographic and what their needs are and what their wants are. I don't think we can put them all in one box. By the way, these chairs were made for men. I have been working on it. I feel like I'm like this. So I
Get
apologize.
comfy.
I have better posture. So, anyway, I'm doing my best.
Curious, Sarah, were there any things that you've seen kind of trending that were surprising as far as the amenities that are being desired versus kind of the staple, you know, dog parks, gyms and stuff like that? And what kinds of things have you thought, maybe any interesting creative type of amenities that?
Yes, really fun ones. We're doing some fun new build projects in LA right now, and we're looking at zip cars. So, you know, not everybody wants a car, particularly in LA. You can't park it anywhere. So we're looking at zip cars. All facilities right now, we're looking at, you know, how do we get Uber locations, and just a fun property in the desert just said, you know what, we use Uber so much, we just like some benches and some seating. And they're just such basic things we can do. There's also a new app that Jeanette found, and it's an amenity app. And essentially it's made for your community, where you offer it to your residents, and it gives them discounts on massage therapy. It can be fitness studios. It can be WAG, the dog walking services. And so it builds the community that way. If you ever want to do something nice for the resident, whether you just want to give them a, you know, just it could be for renewal, it could be anything. You can actually put credits on the app and toward dog walking or massage, and that's been a really nice thing for properties that don't have a lot of amenities, because you can offer that fitness center even without having it in your location.
Wow, that's very helpful. It's in office and industrial and the other formats. Are you finding anything of that kind of level of technology where the end user gets more frequent interaction? They can dial up whatever they're looking for. Or is that, I'm just curious if that's blending in there.
Not on industrial. I mean, we're not seeing it quite there. On the office, hearing more about it, we personally haven't done anything at the moment. I mean, it's more on the directories that are more advanced, kind of what we spoke to earlier, just the technology in the building is becoming more of a challenge, and making sure you're able to serve all these new features you're trying to add. So, I mean, we've had some, adding some charging stations at our seating areas, things like that, but not to the extent of the more, let's say, concierge type services.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, I think we at Office just try to copy what the residential folks do. So, but I would say another big trend and differentiator. I don't know if we touched on necessarily before in the office environment as part of the experience is on-demand everything, right? There's just going to be more, not only on demand at the decision maker level, but on demand for everybody that's in your office building. And food's a big component of that. Health and wellness is a big component of that. Transportation's a big component of that, as well as individual controls around lights and HVAC. So people are investing in apps so that the individual can control their temperature, the individual can control their light, the individual obviously can control things like their desk height. And then in addition, transportation. So, we're looking at rolling out a pilot of something like Zip cars, right? Where an individual can rent a car for a minute by an app or overnight or over a weekend. And then food is the thing I think is in an office environment kind of paramount, and you can't always put in a cafe. So people are experimenting with different forms of either apps or utilizing a third party to bring food to the consumer. So yeah, for sure. But it's all around on-demand services and continuing to expand that on-demand offering in a technology platform. So that's kind of real changing now.
I think it's fascinating because I know where we're at. We have those food booths or trucks coming in, every week, and it's just kind of they even have a group that comes in and does people's nails and stuff like that. I mean, I'm amazed at the creativity that's coming in the commercial side with being able to meet those demands. And as you said, Daniel, kind of in the concierge level, that's sort of similar to multifamily, and I think we're really starting to help each other in seeing like, oh well, they add this. As I mentioned, I went to the district. They had this cool thing they do with the community where they had, I think they had students come in and there was a project for them and they built this paper flower wall which became their selfie wall. I thought that was really kind of interesting. So people are coming in just while they're there taking all these great selfie pictures, which obviously geocaches into where they are, and so people are going, oh well, that's kind of fun. What else do they have there? So it is kind of fascinating how they're dovetailing into one another. So I guess more to come when we see that in the commercial side. I'm curious, one of the things we thought would be kind of fun was to ask each of our panelists kind of a favorite story that they would share where maybe their team had to band together, brainstorm, do something to overcome some interesting obstacles or resolve an issue. Because I think stories always tell a great point. So maybe, Sarah, you can give us some ideas of some things you might have done in your group.
Sure.
Share with us.
So we had a portfolio come in. It was very, very distressed. The owner was on the verge of handing them back to the bank, and we were sort of his last-ditch effort. Will you help? And we are always up for a challenge. So we took on this portfolio. It wasn't in the greatest location, Hemet. So you can kind of get a sense of,
what?
All right, it was a little further out than we typically go, and it was rough. There were 3 properties, but there was one in particular that was gang infested, and it was really, really tough. And I know, looking at a couple folks here who adamantly worked on them, and it was really tough. We hired really great people, and they were scared. They had vandalism to their cars. It was a scary environment to go on. So we did a lot of lighting. Those lightings, they would go out. And so it was sort of, do we continue to do this, or do we cut bait here on this particular asset? So to encourage the whole group, what we did is we sort of said, all right, we're going to do some team building. So we grabbed all the corporate associates, including myself, and we went out there with paintbrushes and just working materials. I was painting handrails with someone. It was actually quite funny because this guy comes out of his apartment and looks at the regional and I and goes, hey, I've never seen painter chicks before. Like, that's awesome. That was actually a compliment. But you know, we got our hands dirty and it was really fun. We did it together. The team really felt good. Sad thing is, about 6 months later, that was the one asset that we eventually said, it just doesn't make sense for you to hold on to this. It's in the wrong part of town. We are going to spend good money after bad, and we're going to go through eviction after eviction. And so he agreed, let that one go, and the other two were amazing. We completely regutted them, did everything. He sold them for a very lovely profit last year and was thrilled, made up for the other one. So sometimes it's about knowing when to cut bait, but it certainly wasn't because we didn't try, and sometimes it just takes, you gotta give it everything until you know you've done enough, right? So I think it was really good for our team, it was certainly good for the ownership, and it was good for the on-site.
Well, I love that. It's a great creative way to kind of take hold of an asset and figure out if you can add some juice to it.
Absolutely, and sometimes, unfortunately, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Those are just
not
valuable.
often. That was the only one.
Yeah.
So.
How about you, Daniel?
On our end, I mean, I spoke to one that was interesting, but another project that we had is an office building in Los Angeles, and the office building actually had two parcels that were zoned differently, also next to a historic home. And we had a neighbor that purchased this historic home that basically became, agitated by our property and the sounds from the property. And, to the extent where he was hosing down people, literally. And so we just had a constant challenge with this guy. And, it evolved in this issue with police. And it basically took, our whole team to come together with how do we address this issue and the root of what the issue was, because it was never the same issue. But it ultimately came down to that on the property that wasn't zoned for office had improvements on it. And there was trash enclosures, there was an exhaust fan that fed our underground parking, and it was installed on the property that was zoned part of this historic district, which these improvements never should have been on. And you go to the city and they have zero record of any of it. And also the neighbor is now going into the building and safety department, filing complaints on a daily basis. The police department's involved in all that. So we're constantly going through this, trying to figure out how do we deal with this issue. And it ultimately came down to, one more thing. The owner decides to sell the building. So to add complexity to it, we're trying to figure out how to address this neighbor, make him, not, negatively impact our tenants and our staff, and also go and try and resolve the issue and make sure it doesn't impact our sellers or our owner's objective, who's trying to sell the building in a short period of time. The problem's not solved yet. The building has sold, but we're actually still involved with solving the problem as part of the post-closing exercise. And I think it's a matter of weeks before it is completely resolved. But just a very unique situation that you couldn't have guessed how it would play out.
I would say, would you have done it any differently, having had that knowledge this far?
There were so many players involved that there was one curveball after another, and you couldn't have guessed what was coming.
Yeah. How about you, Jason? What story would you lay upon this group here?
Well, a much less dramatic story than these two. But it goes along the lines of, I was thinking about this, it goes along the lines of kind of what we were talking about today of flexibility, right? And we recently had a full floor customer in an office building that just started looking to renew. They're a year out from their expiration. And so they're going to the market to do a survey. They're our full floor customer. Large general contractor. And, they came to us on a Friday and said, hey, we've got 26 people that are rolling off a construction project, but we don't have anything else to go put them on for another 90 days. We have nowhere to put these individuals, our teammates. Could you help us? So they were scrambling out in the market trying to find a place to put these people for 90 days. And so, our team made the decision to strategically, even if the 90 days was an economic loss, which the math proved out to be the case, and never mind if they bang up the walls and the carpet, we're probably having to repaint and recarpet. But the thought was, how do we show this customer we understand their business, we're there from them, we're there to be flexible. And so this was a Friday we got the word. Saturday we had the deal negotiated. Thursday we had it signed and they were in the following Monday in a spec suite. And so a small story, but it's one that the team who's in the room that actually did this, I think demonstrated and created a memory for this customer that I think will be really valuable as they make the renewal decision over the next 3-4 months. So,
are you all finding that your owners, whether you're a third party or not, that they're being much more cooperative in kind of addressing creative problems that come up? Or are they just sort of sticking to their guns and that, no, this is the way I've always done things? Are you finding more cooperation, being creative?
Well, what I would say, since I'm not on the third-party management side,
right.
We're an owner-operator, but we work with third parties on the leasing side, and hearing them tell stories about different people they work with. Mm-hmm. There was a story described about, a deal in Pasadena, I think in the prior panel earlier today, where we had two different owners, one that was going to go put $70 a foot and reposition a property, the other owner that was owning it today, viewing that wasn't a prudent investment. And so I think you see certain owners that really get it and really get that the value is going to be driven with capital expenditures and being flexible and taking small bets. And there's certain people that I think are stuck in how our business has always been done. We're doing 10-year leases with credit tenancy, and we're going to do minimal TIs, and that's how I've always done it, and that's how I'm going to continue to do it. And I think those people will get left behind. So I think you have two different profiles of owners out there.
So how about you, Sarah?
I would almost maybe challenge that just a hair, just from the standpoint of, I think there's always going to be a place for the Woody walk-ups. As I mentioned before, not everybody wants all the bells and whistles, and not everybody wants to pay for them. So I think, we have properties where we'll take them on, and we'll have we have all these big, ideas and thoughts, and by the time we get done and we pencil it, some of our folks they're going to pay this. They're not going to pay an extra $200, and we're going to lose them. And the cost of the improvement is going to take far beyond any reasonable rate of return. So I think you've really got to look at it case by case. I know for us, for example, we're across from the district, our office building. We are not in a glam building. We have no amenities. We want an elevator, and we'll probably move for an elevator at some point. But we were willing to settle because the price was right, and we were kind of trying to make a good quality decision. So I think it really depends on location, it depends on the demographic, and it depends on providing sort of a broad base. Not, if every building was brand new and retrofitted 110%, geez, I don't know what would happen.
Oh.
Then where's the upside? And we just kind of keep going.
That circles back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, as far as, again, the CapEx and refreshing buildings, mm-hmm. and making them younger and deciding what's enough. How do you decide what's enough, and is the demand of your tenants or residents becoming so great that at some point there's a what I call an ROI flight out of California because of the compression on what it costs to do things from our labor components? I mean, City of LA keeps raising the minimum wage, and so that just trickles out to everything else. So how are we seeing that kind of flight? Are we seeing that just deals not trading anymore, or are we going to come to a stop?
Well, I know in our business park portfolio that we manage, and then some of it that we own, we can't spend a ton of money there. Our TIs are limited. The tenants don't have anywhere to go. You can't build the business parks today, and trust me, we've tried. But you just can't make sense of building it, just too expensive to do. So I think those tenants that are in that small incubator business park space, they want to run their business. They don't need the amenities or don't necessarily want to pay for the amenities because they're running their small businesses. And we're very conscious of the money we put in those parks. Now, we want quality. That's always key. We pride on making sure our properties are kept up, maintained, and provide kind of what a standard expectation is. But I mean, we're not going to go to the extent on our industrial and business parks to go put in some of the improvements that, Jason's seen on the office side.
So it sounds like we're hearing is that there still is a good place for what I would call B and even maybe C+ level products where it's good, clean, just older products that don't have as many amenities. And then there's perhaps another group that they want all those bells and whistles and they'll pay for it. They'll figure it out one way or another through their pricing of their products and so forth. Sounds like that's what it's stratifying to.
Yeah, and the key there is you have the B product with the A service. And
Right,
then it's
service.
a slam dunk.
Right.
There's absolutely going to be a market all the time for that.
So let me ask, if there are some question and answers, or questions rather, that you can provide answers to, that you might have for the panel, because I know we're getting close to our time and want to get back on track. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Yes?
Day by day, our world is becoming more dangerous. What are you doing across the different kinds of real estate in terms of security for your clients?
Good question.
Good question, and boy, how do you manage to that, right? I think you do it via emergency procedures, just, being constant on your communication, but it's sort of like that crime happens everywhere. I mean, it's a scary place right now. We just all have to be aware and just band together, but I don't think that we can eliminate it, unfortunately. Cameras, we do a lot of cameras.
Um,
Okay. How about Daniel or Jason?
I mean, the policies and procedures are definitely there that we need. And, we also, we do some training for our own staff on just when you're in kind of a dangerous situation, how to respond. So we've done some of the, shooter type training at our organization.
Is that where you train them to shoot?
No. Well, we actually done that. We've shot BB guns at, the Boy Scout camp, but that's a little different. So, we don't see it as much on the need on our industrial stuff to focus on that. I mean, some of the office areas, we do have the 24/7 security where necessary. But, other places where we try and build the relationships with the police force to kind of keep the presence on our properties. I mean, we've got one of our properties where we've got an exterior restroom with the code, and every time that the police guys circulate, we introduce ourselves and give them the code and say, here's a clean restroom. So, that sometimes works.
Jason, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, not to be duplicative of what they said, I think the only difference I would add on top of what they said, which I agree with, is, I think it too depends on the environment, right? I think security is on top on everybody's list. And, a downtown LA building or a downtown Chicago building is going to be very different than, a suburban building in Irvine from a standpoint of what's required. So I think it's not one size fits all, and it's something that everyone just has to really think what is appropriate for that particular asset or building or submarket.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, question in the back.
How are you planning for the eventual downturn in our business cycle, which has been going on longer than normal?
Did everyone hear that as far as how are we planning for the downturn that is likely coming? Obviously, we've had a long run, longer than most, probably the longest cycle we've seen in many years, if at all. We're hitting about 9-10 years. So what are you doing to batten down the hatches and prepare for that?
Well, I'm hoping we got at least a few more years of runtime because we're ground up on a couple projects right now, and I need that time. So.
Yeah, I don't really see any downturn yet. I think maybe there's a leveling. We're not seeing the 10% rent increases, and certainly rent control is going to help that. But I'm not seeing a downturn yet, and I think the market is still really, really strong. As far as getting prepared and ready for it, I think it goes back to making sure your NPR scores are high, making sure your resident satisfaction, your tenant satisfaction is there. People like to stay where they're happy, and if you give good quality service, there's really no benefit to moving. So just make sure you're taking care of your house.
Jason, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say from an investment perspective, I mean, the downturn's going to come, right? Whether it's 1 year away or 5 years away, who knows? But a downturn's going to come. And so, from a new capital deployment standpoint, instead of chasing yield in tertiary markets, which some people are doing, that's not our strategy at Granite. We'd actually rather take a lower yield and go more into core locations, core markets, theory being that there's more sustainable job growth there, the last to correct, the first to come back. So that's how we're choosing to deploy new capital, although it's hard to do right now, given where prices and yields are. From an existing asset perspective, we're really focused, instead of scaling back on capital, investing more in our properties, both services and capital, really focusing on customer retention. And if we can do longer term renewals than short, obviously at this point in the cycle where rents are, I think it's a wise financial move. So that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you all. I appreciate your insights and sharing that with this group. So I think that'll conclude it, so get everyone on their way, but I appreciate your being a part of this audience, and I think we had a lot of great information. So thank you.
Thank you.